Ambassador Veltrax felt her stomach twist as she stepped off the transport shuttle. Her 4 eyes darted around the human settlement of Terra Verde, taking in every detail with growing unease. The reports she had received back at Coalition headquarters seemed like complete nonsense. How could it be true that the galaxy's most feared killers, the Thornback Reapers, were actually bringing their babies to live with humans? The dirt beneath her feet was still warm from the shuttle's engines when Director Jake Morrison approached her. He was typical of his species, tall, with hands that looked like they had seen years of hard work, and eyes that held a strange calmness that Veltrax found unsettling. Most beings showed some fear when discussing apex predators, but this human seemed completely at ease. "Welcome to our little colony," Ambassador Morrison said, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I've read your preliminary reports. I know you think we're all crazy here. Hell, 6 months ago, I would have agreed with you." Veltrax adjusted her translation device and tried to keep her voice steady. "The Coalition Council finds these claims highly irregular, Director Morrison. Our scientists have studied Thornback Reapers for over 2 centuries. They are solitary hunters, kill everything that comes near their territory. The idea that they would willingly interact with any other species, let alone trust them with their offspring, goes against everything we know about their behavior." Morrison nodded slowly, his weathered face creasing into what humans called a grin. "Yeah, that's what our xenobiologist said too. Right up until the first Mama Thornback showed up at our gates carrying her baby, the ground beneath their feet began to vibrate. It started as a low rumble like distant thunder, but quickly grew stronger. Veltrax felt her hearts begin to race as the vibration turned into a rhythmic pounding that seemed to shake the very air around them. Other humans in the settlement stopped their work and looked toward the forest edge, but none of them seemed panicked. If anything, they looked almost expectant. "Speaking of which," Morrison said, checking a device on his wrist, "looks like we're about to get another delivery? Right on schedule." The forest at the edge of the settlement began to move. Trees that had stood for decades bent and swayed as something massive pushed through them. Veltrax's training kicked in, and her hand moved instinctively toward her weapon. Every military briefing she had ever attended screamed at her to run, to call for backup, to do anything except stand there and wait for death to emerge from the tree line. But Morrison just stood there, completely relaxed, as if a neighborhood pet was coming home for dinner. The creature that emerged from the forest was beyond anything Veltrax had prepared herself for. She had seen images and videos of Thornback Reapers, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of seeing one in person. It was at least 30 feet from nose to tail, covered in armored scales that gleamed like polished metal in the afternoon sun. Rows of razor-sharp spines ran along its back, each one capable of piercing through starship hull material. Its massive head swung back and forth as it scanned the settlement, and Veltrax could see teeth the size of her forearm gleaming in its partially open mouth, and in those jaws, held with impossible gentleness, was something small that squirmed and made tiny chirping sounds. "Oh good," Morrison said, as casually as if he were commenting on the weather. "Looks like Betty brought us number 4, Betty," Veltrax whispered, her voice barely working. "That's what my daughter calls her, the big mama there. She's been coming around for about 3 months now, always brings her babies here when they're old enough to leave the nest, but too young to hunt on their own." The massive predator approached the settlement's perimeter and stopped. Its huge head lowered toward the ground, and with movements so careful they seemed almost delicate, it placed the young creature on the grass. The baby Thornback was still easily the size of Veltrax herself. With developing spines and scales that already looked deadly, Morrison walked forward with his arms slightly extended, making soft clicking sounds with his tongue. The adult Thornback made a deep rumbling noise that Veltrax felt in her bones, then turned and disappeared back into the forest with surprising speed for something so large. "Third one this week," Morrison said, kneeling down beside the young predator. The baby immediately moved toward him, making the same chirping sounds Veltrax had heard earlier. "Come on, little guy. Let's get you settled in with your buddies." As Morrison gently guided the young Thornback toward a building that looked like it had been specially constructed with reinforced walls and multiple safety features, Veltrax realized her mouth was hanging open. "How is this possible?" she managed to ask. Morrison looked back at her with that same calm expression. "It's exactly what I said the first time it happened. Come on inside, Ambassador. Let me show you how this whole thing works." The doors to the facility slid open with a soft hiss, and Veltrax stepped inside expecting to see some kind of high-tech containment center with force fields and security systems. Instead, she found herself in what looked remarkably like a daycare center. If daycares were built to house creatures that could level city blocks, the first thing that hit her was the sound. Not roars or growls or the screams she expected, but something that sounded almost like laughter mixed with the gentle murmur of human voices. Soft music played from speakers mounted high on reinforced walls, and the lighting was warm and inviting rather than the harsh fluorescence she associated with research facilities. Lisa Brennan sat cross-legged on a specially designed cushion in the center of the room, and Veltrax had to blink several times to process what she was seeing. In Lisa's lap was a creature that made Veltrax's blood run cold just to look at. A juvenile voidstalker, its semi-transparent body shifting between dimensions as it fed from what appeared to be an oversized baby bottle. These creatures were known throughout the galaxy as phantom killers, beings that could phase through solid matter and strike without warning, and this human was bottle-feeding, one like it was a house pet. "Easy there, buddy," Lisa said softly, as the young voidstalker made a contented purring sound. "Don't drink too fast, or you'll get the hiccups again." Around them, the scene only got more impossible. The juvenile thornback reapers, their spines, still small but already gleaming with deadly promise, lay on their bellies, listening as Lisa read from a colorful picture book. Their massive heads rested on their front claws. Their eyes followed the pages with genuine interest. Near the far wall, 3 plasma serpents, creatures whose adult forms could melt through starship armor with their superheated breath, coiled together in what looked like a specially designed heating nest. Even as babies, their scales glowed with internal fire, but they seemed completely calm and content. The key to all this, Lisa explained, never breaking stride in her story, even as she spoke to Veltrax, is understanding that underneath all those terrifying abilities, they're still just kids. They get scared, they get lonely, they need comfort, and structure, and someone to tell them bedtime stories. One of the young Thornbacks got excited during a particularly interesting part of the story, and its spines automatically extended in response. Veltrax jumped back, her hand going to her weapon again, but Lisa just reached over and gently stroked the creature's head. "Careful with those spikes, Nathan," she said calmly. "Remember what we practiced about keeping them tucked in when we're having story time?" The young Thornback made an apologetic, rumbling sound and retracted its spines, then nuzzled against Lisa's hand like a giant, deadly puppy. Across the room, another human caretaker named Mike Torres was engaged in what appeared to be the most dangerous game of hide-and-seek in galactic history. His opponent was a crystal mantis juvenile, a creature whose natural camouflage abilities made it nearly impossible to detect even with advanced scanning equipment. "I wonder where Ruby could be hiding," Mike said in an exaggerated voice, looking around the room with theatrical confusion. She was just here a second ago. A section of the wall that Veltrax had thought was empty suddenly shimmered, and the crystal mantis materialized, its crystalline body refracting light in beautiful but deadly patterns. It made a sound that might have been laughter and immediately vanished again. "These games aren't just fun," Mike explained to Veltrax while continuing to search. They help develop their natural abilities in a safe environment. Ruby here is learning to control her camouflage instead of using it instinctively. It's like teaching a human child not to run into traffic. Veltrax watched in fascination as the young crystal mantis appeared behind Mike and gently tapped him on the shoulder with one of its razor-sharp limbs, careful not to actually cut him. "Found you." Mike laughed, turning around to give the creature what appeared to be the interspecies equivalent of a high five. "But how can you do this?" Veltrax asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "These creatures are apex predators. As juveniles, they could kill you in seconds. Aren't you terrified every moment you're in here?" Lisa looked up from her story, the void stalker in her lap now, dozing peacefully as it shifted in and out of phase. Of course, I'm afraid sometimes, she said honestly. When little Nathan there had his first spine growth spurt and accidentally put holes in 3 walls, yeah, I was scared. When Ruby figured out how to phase through the security doors, that was terrifying. She paused to adjust the Voidstalker's position, and the creature made a sleepy humming sound that vibrated through multiple dimensions. But being afraid and being a caretaker aren't opposite things, Lisa continued. I'm afraid when I take my own kids to the playground too. Afraid they'll fall off the monkey bars or get hurt on the slides. Fear keeps you alert, keeps you careful, doesn't mean you stop caring. Mike nodded in agreement as he set up what looked like a puzzle game for the Crystal Mantis. These parents, these terrifying apex predators that could destroy entire space stations, they trust us with the most precious thing in their universe, their children. That kind of trust isn't something you take lightly. As if to prove his point, the young Voidstalker in Lisa's arms phase-shifted slightly in its sleep, and its partially transparent hand passed right through her chest. For a moment, Veltrax could see the creature's hand inside Lisa's ribcage, inches from her heart, but Lisa just gently guided the limb back to solid form without even pausing in her conversation. Their parents know we understand something that most species in the galaxy don't, Lisa said. And no matter how dangerous you are, no matter how evolved or deadly or powerful when it comes to your kids, you just want them to be safe, happy, and loved. And sometimes the best way to give them that is to trust someone else to help. The room fell into a comfortable quiet, broken only by the soft sounds of sleeping apex predators and the gentle hum of the facility's life support systems. Looking around at the scene, Veltrax began to understand that what she was witnessing wasn't just unprecedented. It was revolutionary. These humans had somehow figured out the one universal truth that connected every intelligent species in the galaxy: parenthood. The research center buzzed with an energy that reminded Veltrax of a military command post during wartime. Dozens of holographic displays floated in the air, each one showing different star systems, different worlds, different impossible scenes of cooperation between humans and creatures that should have been their natural enemies. Dr. Amanda Foster moved between the displays like a conductor directing an orchestra, her fingers dancing across control panels as she pulled up data that made Veltrax's head spin. What you saw in the nursery, Amanda said, gesturing to a massive 3-dimensional map that filled the center of the room. That's just the tip of the iceberg. This phenomenon isn't limited to Terra Verde. It's not even limited to our sector. The map zoomed out, revealing the scope of what the humans had been tracking. Red dots marked human settlements across 3 entire sectors of space, and each pulsed with different colored lights. Blue for Thornback Reapers, green for Voidstalkers, purple for Crystal Mantises, and dozens of other colors representing species that Veltrax recognized as some of the most dangerous predators in known space. Every single one of these settlements is now hosting juvenile apex predators, Amanda continued, her voice filled with barely contained excitement. And it all started completely by accident. She manipulated the display to focus on a single star system on the outer edge of human space. The world of Kepler-7 appeared in detail, showing the early human colony. They're surrounded by dense forest and mountain ranges. 8 months ago, the colonists on Kepler-7 started reporting strange sightings. Adult shadow prowlers approaching their perimeter. But instead of attacking, they were leaving something behind and disappearing back into the wilderness. Veltrax leaned forward, studying the data streams flowing across the display. Shadow prowlers were nightmare creatures, even by apex predator standards, beings of living darkness that could manipulate shadows and light, making them nearly impossible to track or fight. The colonists thought they were being marked for death, Amanda said with a slight smile. They prepared for the worst, set up additional defenses, called for military support. But when they finally worked up the courage to investigate what the shadow prowlers were leaving behind, they found cubs. Tiny shadow prowler babies that had been abandoned at the edge of their settlement. The display showed security footage from the Kepler-7 colony. Veltrax watched as nervous human colonists approached what looked like patches of moving darkness. But as they got closer, the shadows resolved into small, fuzzy creatures with oversized paws and eyes that glowed with soft silver light. The colonists couldn't just leave them there to die, Amanda continued. So they brought them inside, figured out how to feed them, how to keep them comfortable. Within a week, more adult shadow prowlers started showing up with more cubs. But how did it spread? Veltrax asked, watching the timeline data scroll past. How did other species know to trust? Humans. Tom Bradley, the settlement's lead xenobiologist, approached with a tablet full of behavioral analysis data. His face was lit up with the kind of enthusiasm that Veltrax associated with scientists who had just made a career-defining discovery. That's the beautiful part, Tom said, pulling up split-screen footage that made Veltrax's breath catch in her throat. Watch this carefully. On the left, we have security footage of a human mother with her infant child. On the right, footage of an adult thornback reaper with its offspring. The two videos played side by side. And despite the massive physical differences between the subjects, the behavioral patterns were unmistakable. Both the human mother and the thornback parent positioned themselves protectively between their offspring and potential threats. Both responded to distress calls from their young with immediate attention. Both seemed to anticipate their children's needs before they were even expressed. The positioning is identical, Tom continued, highlighting specific moments in the footage. The response times, the protective instincts, even the way they both used gentle physical contact to provide comfort and reassurance. Despite being completely different species from different evolutionary paths, the parental behaviors are virtually the same. Amanda pulled up another display showing communication patterns between different apex predator species. We think they're talking to each other, she said. Not in any way we can understand, but there's definitely some kind of information sharing happening. When the shadow prowlers on Kepler-7 started trusting humans, somehow other apex predators in the region learned about it. The evidence was overwhelming. Migration patterns showed adult apex predators making detours that took them past human settlements. Deep space monitoring stations had detected unusual communication bursts between worlds that hosted different predator species. Even more incredibly, there were reports of apex predators defending human settlements from other threats. Oh, look at this, Tom said, pulling up an incident report from a mining colony on the edge of Thornback territory. 3 weeks ago, a gang of space pirates tried to raid the colony. Before the human defense systems could even respond, a pack of adult thornbacks emerged from the forest and drove off the attackers. The pirates barely escaped with their lives. Veltrax studied the battle recordings, watching in amazement as creatures that could have easily destroyed the human settlement instead fought to protect it. The thornbacks moved with military precision, coordinating their attacks to minimize collateral damage to the colony while maximizing damage to the pirate ships. They're not just dropping off their children, she realized aloud. They're forming some kind of alliance. Exactly, Amanda said, nodding enthusiastically. But it's not a political alliance or a trade agreement or anything we would traditionally understand. It's something much more fundamental than that. Tom pulled up comparative behavioral analysis from dozens of different species, both apex predators and more peaceful civilizations.
Ow.
The data painted a picture that was both simple and profound. Most intelligent species in the galaxy have developed complex social structures, advanced technologies, sophisticated forms of communication, he explained. But somewhere along the way, many of them have lost touch with the basic, universal experience of parenthood. They bureaucratized it, systematized it, turned it into institutions and procedures. He gestured to footage of various galactic civilizations, the rigid educational facilities of the Zentari Empire, the communal child-rearing pods of the collective worlds, the genetic optimization centers of the Advanced Species Coalition. Humans are different, Tom continued. Despite all our technology and social complexity, we've maintained that fundamental, instinctive understanding of what it means to be a parent. And somehow, apex predators, creatures that operate purely on instinct, recognize that in us. The implications hit Veltrax like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't conquered these dangerous creatures through superior firepower or advanced technology. They had earned their trust through something much more basic and powerful: the universal language of caring for children. Oh, this changes everything, she whispered, staring at the vast network of alliances forming across the galaxy. We know, Amanda said quietly. The question is, what do we do about it? The warning sirens started screaming at exactly 14:27 local time. Beltrax was in the middle of reviewing Amanda's research data when the entire facility shook with the force of something massive hitting the outer defensive shields. Emergency lighting bathed everything in red, and the calm atmosphere of the research center instantly transformed into controlled chaos. All civilians to emergency shelters immediately, Jake Morrison's voice crackled over the intercom system. This is not a drill. Repeat, all civilians to emergency shelters now. Beltrax had been through enough military encounters to recognize the sound of incoming weapons fire. But this was different, heavier, more sustained. With the distinctive whine of energy weapons designed to break through planetary defenses, through the facility's windows, she could see bright flashes lighting up the sky as the settlement's defensive grid engaged incoming threats. Cosmic raiders, Amanda said grimly, gathering up her research tablets with practiced efficiency. We've been expecting this for months. Terra Verdi's been too successful, too prosperous, was bound to attract the wrong kind of attention. Journey to the emergency shelter felt like the longest walk of Veltrax's life. Around them, humans moved with the calm efficiency that came from regular emergency drills. She could see the tension in their faces. Parents carried young children, elderly residents were helped along by neighbors, and everyone moved with the quiet determination of people who had prepared for this day but hoped it would never come. The shelter itself was built deep underground, carved out of the natural rock formations that Terra Verde was famous for. As they descended into the reinforced corridors, Veltrax could hear the battle raging above them. The distinctive crack of human plasma cannons mixed with the deeper boom of raider assault weapons. But underneath it all was another sound, a rhythmic pounding that seemed to come from the earth itself. The main shelter area was larger than Veltrax had expected, with several connected chambers that could house the entire settlement population. But what struck her immediately was that they weren't alone. The human caretakers had brought their charges with them. Lisa Brennan sat in one corner, bottle-feeding a young plasma serpent whose scales glowed nervously in the dim emergency lighting. The creature's internal fire was fluctuating with stress, casting dancing shadows on the shelter walls. Nearby, Mike Torres was trying to keep 3 juvenile void stalkers calm as they kept phasing in and out of solid form in response to the sounds of battle above. The nursery sector took a direct hit, Jake Morrison reported as he entered the shelter, his face grim. Outer defensive grid is holding, but barely. We've got military-grade assault ships up there, stuff that could level a city block.
Beltrax
felt her heart sink. Cosmic raiders were known throughout the galaxy for their ruthlessness. They didn't just steal, they destroyed everything they couldn't take, often selling entire populations into slavery. If Terra Verdi's defenses failed, everyone in this shelter would be dead or worse within the hour. That's when the real shaking started. It began as a low rumble, like distant thunder, but quickly grew into something that made the emergency lighting fixtures swing back and forth. The children started crying, and even the adult humans looked concerned. But Lisa and Mike exchanged glances that seemed almost hopeful. What's happening up there? Veltrax asked. But before anyone could answer, the shelter's communication system crackled to life. All defensive positions stand down, came a voice from the surface. Repeat. All human defensive positions stand down immediately. ... Unexpected support. Through the shelter's small periscope viewers designed to let the inhabitants monitor surface conditions during emergencies, Veltrax watched something that would haunt her dreams for the rest of her life. The sky above Terra Verde was filling with creatures that belonged in nightmares, not battlefields. Thornback Reapers emerged from the forest, their massive forms moving with deadly purpose toward the raider ships. But these weren't the solitary hunters that Coalition military briefings described. They moved in coordinated groups, communicating with each other through low-frequency calls that made the shelter walls vibrate. Void Stalkers began phasing into existence around the raider fleet, materializing directly inside some of the smaller ships. Through her translation device, Veltrax could hear the panicked screams of the raiders as creatures of living shadow appeared in their corridors and engine rooms. Crystal. Mantises descended from the mountain peaks like falling stars, their bodies refracting the light of the weapon fire into dazzling displays of color. But there was nothing beautiful about the way they moved. Each one was a precision instrument of destruction, designed by millions of years of evolution to kill efficiently. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted less than 10 minutes. The cosmic raiders, who had built their reputation on overwhelming firepower and brutality, found themselves completely outmatched by creatures operating on instincts older than civilization itself. One by one, the raider ships began fleeing, their engines pushed beyond safe limits as they desperately tried to escape the nightmare that Terra Verde had become. Throughout it all, Lisa continued calmly feeding the young plasma serpent, adjusting the bottle's temperature as the creature's nervous glow began to settle into its normal patterns. Mike had managed to get the juvenile void stalkers to stop phasing randomly, and they now huddled against him like oversized, semi-transparent puppies. "How is this possible?" Veltrax whispered, unable to tear her eyes away from the periscope viewer. Above them, adult apex predators were systematically dismantling what remained of the raider force with surgical precision. Jake Morrison, who had been monitoring the surface communications, looked up with an expression that mixed exhaustion and wonder. The predators started moving the moment our outer defenses were breached. Our sensors picked up massive movement from every direction, creatures we didn't even know were in the area. But why? Veltrax asked. Why would they risk themselves? For a human settlement? Mike Torres looked up from the juvenile void stalkers, one of which had fallen asleep against his shoulder, its body shifting gently between dimensions. "It's simple when you think about it," he said quietly.
Ow!
"We're not just allies with these creatures. We're not just neighbors or trading partners." He gestured around the shelter, taking in the scene of human civilians and apex predator offspring, sharing the same space, the same fear, the same hope for safety. "We're family now," he continued. "And when someone threatens your family's home, when they try to hurt your children, you don't think about politics or treaties or strategic alliances. You just protect what matters most." Outside, the last of the raider ships was disappearing into hyperspace, leaving behind only the wreckage of their ambitions and the quiet satisfaction of creatures who had successfully defended their extended territory. As the all-clear signal sounded and people began to emerge from the shelter, Veltrax realized that she had just witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. Not just an alliance between species, but something deeper and more powerful: the formation of the first truly interspecies family. Veltrax sat in her private quarters aboard the Coalition transport ship, staring at the blank report form that glowed softly on her personal tablet. 3 days had passed since she left Terra Verde, but she still couldn't shake the images from her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lisa Brennan calmly bottle-feeding a creature that could phase through dimensions, or Mike Torres playing hide and seek with a juvenile predator whose adult form could slice through starship armor like paper. The hardest part wasn't describing what she had seen. The hardest part was making the Coalition Council believe it. She had tried 17 different ways to start her report. Each one sounded more impossible than the last. How do you explain to a galaxy of advanced civilizations that the key to universal peace might be found in something as simple as babysitting? How do you convince military strategists and political leaders that humanity's greatest strength had nothing to do with their weapons, or their ships, or their tactical brilliance? Finally, she decided to just tell the truth, no matter how crazy it sounded. To the honored members of the Galactic Coalition Council, she began typing. "What I am about to report will challenge everything we thought we knew about interspecies relations, military strategy, and the fundamental nature of power in our galaxy." She paused, remembering the moment when the adult Thornback Reaper had gently deposited its offspring at Jake Morrison's feet. The trust in that simple gesture had been absolute and complete, the kind of trust that took most species generations to build. "Humanity's greatest weapon," she continued, "is not their technology, though their innovations continue to impress. It is not their adaptability, though they have colonized worlds that would kill most of our species within hours. It is not even their warrior spirit, though their military capabilities are well documented. The words flowed easier now, as if writing them was helping her understand what she had witnessed. Their greatest weapon is something far more subtle and far more powerful. Their recognition that the universe's most fundamental drive, the desire to protect and nurture one's young, transcends species, form, and fear itself. She thought about the research data that Amanda Foster had shown her. 42 worlds, 17 different apex predator species, all of them voluntarily bringing their most precious possessions to human settlements. Not because they had been conquered or coerced, but because they had recognized something in humanity that even the Coalition's best diplomats had missed. In my 3 decades of diplomatic service, Veltrax wrote, I have witnessed countless attempts to forge alliances with apex predator species. Our military has tried conquest and failed catastrophically. Our diplomats have tried negotiation and been ignored completely. Our scientists have tried understanding their behavior and succeeded only in documenting how utterly alien their thinking patterns are compared to our own. The transport ship shuddered slightly as it jumped to hyperspace, but Veltrax barely noticed. She was lost in her memories of the Terra Verde nursery, where the impossible had become routine. Yet humans have achieved what our greatest minds could. Not. They have formed true alliances with creatures that could destroy entire fleets. Not through dominance, not through treaty, but through the simple act of loving their children. They have proven themselves worthy of the ultimate trust that any parent can give, the care and protection of the next generation. She pulled up the tactical analysis from the Raider attack, studying the precision with which the apex predators had defended the human settlement. It hadn't been random violence or territorial aggression. It had been a coordinated defense mounted by creatures, protecting their extended family. Every human settlement in sectors 7 through 9 is now protected by creatures that could level cities. She continued typing. Shadow prowlers that can manipulate darkness itself. Void stalkers that exist partially outside our dimension. Crystal mantises that can become virtually invisible. Thornback reapers whose spines can pierce through any known armor. These creatures now consider human space to be their territory, not because they were conquered or bargained with, but because humans proved themselves capable of something that transcends species boundaries: genuine parental care. The scope of what humanity had accomplished was staggering. They had essentially created the most powerful military alliance in galactic history without firing a shot or signing a single treaty. And they had done it by appealing to instincts that were older than civilization itself. We have underestimated humanity, Veltrax wrote, her fingers moving faster across the tablet as the full implications became clear. We have focused on their technology, their expansion rate, their military capabilities. We have treated them as another emerging spacefaring species to be cataloged and managed. But we have missed the most important aspect of their nature. Thought about the battle footage, watching creatures of nightmare working together to protect a human settlement, with the kind of coordination that military strategists spent lifetimes trying to achieve? They have not merely survived among the galaxy's apex predators, they have become the apex caregivers. In a universe where survival often depends on the protection of the pack, where the strongest bonds are formed through shared vulnerability and mutual care, this may be the most powerful evolutionary advantage of all. The report was almost complete, but Veltrax knew that the hardest part was still ahead of her. The Coalition Council would want recommendations, concrete actions they could take in response to this new reality. But what do you do when an entire species has fundamentally changed the balance of power in the galaxy, simply by being good parents? My recommendation to the Council is immediate and unconditional. Humanity's diplomatic status must be upgraded. 2. Level 1 priority, with full recognition as a major galactic power. This is not because of their military might or their technological achievements, though both are considerable. It is because they have earned the trust and protection of every apex predator species in known space. She saved the report and leaned back in her chair, looking out through the small viewport at the stars streaming past. Somewhere out there, human children were playing with juvenile creatures that could reshape reality itself. And somewhere else, Adult versions of those same creatures were patrolling the borders of human space, ready to defend their chosen family against any threat. Anyone trusted by every apex predator in known space to raise their young. She had written, is not a species to be trifled with. As the transport ship carried her toward the Coalition capital, Veltrax couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was about to change in ways that none of them could predict. Humanity had found something that went deeper than politics or warfare, or even survival itself. They had found family. And that, she realized, was the most dangerous weapon of all.